We're not here to make up the numbers, we're here to compete as well. This squad, with the power they have on their day, they can do anything they want.
Hello and welcome to the Stourbridge FC Women's Monthly Press Conference. Joining us today is manager Andy Fisher and vice chairman Andy Bullingham. How are we both?
Very well.
Very good, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks for joining us. What we'll do, as always, is we'll have an opening statement from yourself regarding any latest news. Then we'll take some questions from inside the room, and then we'll open it up to all the questions that's been on social media. So I'll start off with myself, Andy Fisher, as not only the women's football team manager, but also the head of women's section. Can you elaborate on the press release regarding the restructure that has been announced today and give your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so obviously we as a club are always, within the women's section, always looking at kind of how we want to progress that women's section, progress what's going on underneath it. And part of that is the development of players, as the women's first team has been successful over the last few years and hopefully continues to be successful. How do we ensure that, that the closing of the gap between the women's first team and the development team, the reserve team, and the younger junior girls that are coming through the pathway? How do we close that gap and make sure those girls who are 16 stepping into women's football are best ready and best fit for women's football, whether that be reserve team football or first team football? So what we kind of proposed to Andy not so long back was how it looks at the moment. We've got you under 18s who form part of the women's section, your reserve team and your first team, and your academy team, obviously. And what we've noticed, especially Mike with the academy, is that they were travelling and playing a lot of these academy teams, and just the physicality of some of the academy players that played against us, because they were playing women's football. As weren't, they were playing on a Saturday, against other under 18s, and we noticed that actually that was forming a little bit of a disadvantage, not ability wise, but in terms of physicality. So we kind of decided how can we look at changing that? How can we make sure we are closing that gap with that, but then also looking at how we can widen the development for these juniors coming through. And we've agreed, and what we've decided as a club is that we're going to have 3 women's teams, so it'll be complete open age. So you'll have your first team who will participate as normal in the National League, your reserve team as normal in the Reserve League as this season, and then we will have an under 18s. We'll have what we call is the Stourbridge development team, who will go in and play Sunday League football or start in Tier 7, which is great. Really, it's exciting, and Andy will know. This team started in that division. So you now got your women's team aspiring to be Tier 3 and sat in Tier 4. And then you've got this new development team that's coming in Tier 7. It's exciting. And the idea is to be able to have a bigger, broader balance of diet for, the juniors that come through from 16s into the women's section, and look at where they're best fitted on a weekly basis in terms of the development team, the reserve team and the first team. So in summary, next year we'll be having 3 women's teams, 2 that will be amazingly in the women's pyramid.
That kind of ties into the next question I was going to ask, with how are you going to differentiate who goes into the Reserve National League and who's going to be playing Tier 7?
Yeah, so with that we've looked at a couple of the changes with the staffing structure. Mike, who's obviously my assistant, is also head of academy, and he will kind of oversee the player pathway between the 3 teams with his expertise. In line with then Matt Guys, who will be development team manager, but also recruitment lead, basically. So he'll be looking at pooling the best players in and around the local area to bring them into Stourbridge and bring them into our pathway. We want to look at almost an elite pathway. This is where the club's going, hopefully. And then G will be the reserve team manager, but also head coach and kind of a phase lead. And between the 3 of them, myself included, obviously, in regards to the first team, we'll look at where each of these individual girls that come through the pathway best fit. So it might be that we need a girl who needs to go in and maybe experience a bit of rough and ready football. That might be down at Tier 7. Maybe you get at reserve level, you get a lot of youth and young players playing in the systems at Forest and Derby and West Brom. and that's what we want our reserve team to be. So just giving that extra diet and being able to look at the individual as an whole and where they then fit in that pathway. So that is one of the biggest kind of changes that we've made already, is that we'll have a team on a weekly basis who will be able to sit down and look at where each of the girls' football is best fitted between the three teams.
And am I right in thinking that the academy team is still there in partnership with Dudley College, and is that just another team that could potentially push through to the first team as well?
Yeah, and growing. I don't know if Andy wants to jump in on that. I think there's a lot to talk about the academy, but 100% that adds to the pot really.
Yeah, I mean the academy's growing. We're still working hard with Dudley College to make that happen. The girls section probably within that academy can probably grow quicker than the boys. We're restricted a little bit by Dudley College in terms of the numbers that we can have. So at this point in time they want to keep it manageable, so they don't want it to be sort of 40, 50, 60 big. We're looking at other avenues with other organisations and schools to see whether there's an opportunity there for us to provide the academy for them as well, to see whether that happens. I think going back to what Andy just said, that the biggest difficulty we have, and this is across men's, boys, women, girls, is that transition from that sort of 18, 19, 20-year-old age into first team football. And when the team originally started at tier 7, of course that transition was really easy. That transition when you're in the National League and getting players that are good enough to hop up and be part of that first team is so hard. And if we do one a season with the men's section, that's great. What we're doing with the women is bucking that trend a bit and doing more than that, and Andy's give opportunity to people, but it is so difficult, and I think it'll get harder and harder. So it has to be an elite pathway where we're trying to encourage the best girls and the best boys to come to the football club so that we can make that transition through. Homegrown talent works better.
For someone who's been working alongside each other for like 5-6 years, how good, Andy, is it to see how far the club's come in the past 5 years in the women's section? That's to yourself, Andy B.
Yeah, more than one Andy. That's brilliant. It's just, we've talked about it occasionally when I've had a pint, we reflect. And meeting Andy down at the Glassworks pub and him talking to me and me talking to him about coming along and joining, and then ultimately him saying to me, I think if we start to find a little bit of money to pay expenses, we might be able to go another level and another level, and to watch it happen, and people like Mike and Cal come on board, and they've been integral. The whole thing's been integral. It's no one person has necessarily made this work. It's a group of people that have sort of been like-minded, got together and pushed really hard on the door. They've pushed hard on our door, which we like, because they're nice problems to have. No's always an answer, but if and I find that really difficult to say, but if we can say yes and we can see that it's working and moving in the right direction, why wouldn't we keep pushing hard to see how far we can go? And the women's section always had that option there because of the levels in the women's section, and teams like Wolves and Albion and Derby and Stoke and all those teams almost being so close to the level we were at, and the thought that you might be able to one day get to a level where you could play them. I mean, that's got to be the ultimate dream, because it can't happen with the men's first team, can it? We're not ever going to get in the bloody Championship or the Premier League or those sort of things. So it's brilliant to feel like we can compete with those sort of sides. They may go away now in terms of the way the game's progressing, because budgets will increase and players and teams will change, but I think we're making the most of it while we can.
The new structure's obviously been announced. Is that something that you've kind of come up with as a club, or have you based it on something that you see as another club? Where did the actual idea come from?
Is that for me?
Whoever.
I think, as Andy touched on, it was a collective. It was something that me and Mike and Cal had already spoken about early on, in terms of what we thought would be best. And then as the season's progressed, we've identified that as a factor. And as your women's team, your first team progresses and becomes better, you start to see that gap forming, and you think, how are we going to do it? And so I think it was just a collective opinion from me, Mike and Cal, and we pitched it to Andy, and it went from there. And I think
it didn't take much pitching, because playing adult football is absolutely critical to players coming through, and once they reach 16, the sooner you can stick them in adult football and they can get used to the physicality of it, it makes such a difference in terms of that transition up to the full senior level. You know, it has to be done, and the quicker you can do it, the better chance you've got of bringing players through.
One last question for myself, Andy Bullingham, this one's for you. With the women's and girls section continuously growing, how do you plan your own working week, and what support have you brought in to not only maintain what you've built but also continue pushing forward?
Good question. We will, in terms of the junior section, we're going to be fairly careful on how much we grow it, because we don't want to dilute what we're doing. It is an elite pathway, and therefore I think if you end up having a team in every age group, and we've seen this with the boys, you can almost dilute your offering, and it's not so focused on development and getting players to where we want them to be by the time they're 16. So in terms of that's how we will approach that. In terms of maintaining the way we look after everything, that's why Mike, in essence, is a full-time employee of the club. That's why Callum is now a full-time employee of the club. That's why we've put them on, and although they're getting involved in both men's, boys and girls and women's football, having them involved and here for us means that there's a little bit less for Andy and I to do, so we can focus on the strategic stuff. But it means things are more focused and being done in the right times, because if it ends up on the shoulders of two people, things get done very slowly, as Andy knows with me. So support is good.
Yeah, and moving on from there, we're going to talk about the horses game. We just had big game, big occasion for us, stepping into the women's play competition for the first time in the National League. We've progressed to the semi-final now. How do you think that game panned out as a whole, and physically, mentally, did it go how you expected?
Yeah, it did, because we've done our homework, you know, so we knew we'd watched footage of them, and we're fully aware of what they're all about. That, you know, they've come down from Tier 3, so we knew. I think what we've got to remember, or just know, our experience that we've seen, we kind of knew what we've seen already this season, is there's quite big jumps, and I think you've seen that with the FA Cup results over the weekend. There's quite big jumps between each of the divisions now, and I think that's becoming more of a, you know, more obvious. So when teams come down from Tier 3, they're still very strong. They're still really good units and good outfits, regardless with their relegation. And I think Sheffield showed that the first game of the season, didn't they? You know, that there's no coincidence that they beat us and beat us comfortably in a way first game of the season. A lot of those players have just been playing Tier 3 football. It's because the jump's massive. All have done the same. Yes, they've brought in some new players, and they're a big, physical, and stronger than us from minute 1 to 90. There's no doubt about it. We want winning that game on physicality for sure. The good thing is that I think the players, the staff adapted really quickly. Me and Andy spoke about it yesterday, that, you know, it was actually quite exciting to win that type of game, because you've experienced a different challenge there. You know, a team who actually probably are across the pitch were bigger and stronger than us. Probably, you know, winning every duel in the middle of the park, winning every set piece. How do you win that game? You know, how do you stop them from scoring a set piece? And they had stacks of set pieces. You know, when you think about the game, you think about that last 20 minutes, but we dealt with it. And that brings me so much more, you know, that brings me so much more excitement that we've dealt with that kind of, and that's confidence for the players to me, that you've gone and you've come away from a result in that kind of game, which was, in my opinion, and I know a lot of the staff's opinion, players, probably our toughest challenge yet this season, for sure. So, great result. In the semi-finals of the play, I said it in my post-match to you, was the play a target? No, it wasn't. I mean, when you get knocked out of the FA Cup as early as we didn't want to, obviously. Other priorities happen, and we've had some tough games, Leafield and Peterborough. You know, they're not easy games to get into that, and then you play all, and then you find yourself in the semi-final, and now it becomes a little bit exciting. You're thinking, actually, if we can get to that final in our first season of the National League, then yeah, let it be, and with other successes that might happen, it could be a really good season.
I'm just excited we've got a home tie in the next round.
There is that as well.
With that, I was going to mention to you, Andy Bullingham, how does it feel for you seeing the women's team reach a trophy semi-final in this league at the first time of asking?
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? There's all sorts of ways of reflecting on it, because I reflect on it in terms of a costing, because of course it's murdered us in terms of both the reserves and the first team, and the draws we've had are almost like they've been stage draws and somebody's on the wind-up. And there's no support, is there? So the clubs that you go to don't have to pay anything towards the cost of the transport, which I think is wrong, and that needs to be changed, because in men's football there's some support for that, and it needs to be looked at, that does for me, because it would make it fairer, because otherwise teams like us, and we've had the discussion, is do you pay 250 quid to not be in it, to save yourself a whole load of money travelling all around the country trying to play games? But anyway, we're there. So to be in the semi-final in our first year in the National League and a National Midlands League, and we're top, honestly, it doesn't get any better. I just think the way it's going, the squad Andy and Mike and the team have put together is fantastic, isn't it? And I just hope we can continue and just be modest about what we're doing and not get overly excited. One of the things we talk about is regularly is just to keep our feet on the ground. The idea that people keep talking about we may or may not be promoted, get that out your head. Just keep playing one game at a time, and if ultimately we celebrate, that's great, but don't sort of get there before we've got there, for me.
Yeah,
Play it nice and easy.
And back to you, Fisher. Due to the Christmas period, we've got fixtures coming up thick and fast. We've had a couple of new signings come in. We've got a few players still injured. How is the group dealing with it as a whole? Are the new players settling in well and the girls returning back to fitness?
Yeah, so it's been a really odd period for us. When you think about it, we've had 2 games in the matter of months, haven't we? We had, the freeze here beforehand and a few games cancelled. So it's been odd, but I think that's been, generally for everybody. So everyone's dealing with that factor. And then unfortunately we get a free week this week. So this whole period has been strange for me. So yes, they're coming thick and fast probably after this week, but I think the build up to Christmas and after Christmas has been tough, because the players have lost that little bit of momentum, and that was one of the things that we said in the changing rooms, especially after the Sutton game, which was, not a great game to come back to for many reasons after the Christmas break, and then you're thrown straight into a semi-final against Hull. So it's been a tough challenge for the girls mentally. I think in regards to the new players, I spoke to Lois yesterday. I mean, she's made a debut and got injured and been out, and it's a shame for her really, because she hasn't had a really good running, and we know what she can offer without a doubt. She needs a good running. Lexi gets sent off in her first appearance, so she's out as well. So the new signings have had it a little bit tough in a sense in terms of coming in. So we just need a good run of games, and over the next 2 weeks is exciting. We've got some huge games in terms of Calcer and Moors, Calcer midweek and Moors. And that's when for me the focus shifts again, and we get our head down and 100% Andy's right. We focus on each game as a challenge as it comes. Did you ask about injuries, or was that?
Yeah, about injuries. We've had a few out.
Yeah, we have. So obviously Lois is injured. Richard's done great work with her. She would have been cup tied anyway Sunday, so she didn't miss out there. I suppose what we would have done was put her in the reserves to play some game time. She'll feature in the reserves this weekend against Wolves. It's a great game for some of our players, fringe and also injured, to go and play some reserve team football whilst we haven't got a game. So Lois will be back this week, which is exciting and great to see. Mel Rogers is probably a week stroke 2 away. There's still some discomfort in the ankle there when she turns, so she's doing some running and keeping herself fit. But we'll see how that goes. Neve Murphy, he's back into training a bit more now, which is great. That's real great progress for her. So our next steps will be some reserve team football for her, see where she's at. And Lexi's serving her ban. So next 2 games, I think it is, and then she'll be back in hopefully.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it, whether you ought to have a bit of a winter break when you have all this happening. I always think when you've got the summer season playing once a week, play twice a week and get a collection of games ahead. Then you can have the sort of a 4-week break, because weather December, Jan's always going to be poor, isn't it? And so, and even if you are playing, you're playing on pretty rubbish pitches because they're claggy or rock hard for any reason. It would make sense, but
it's what you see in Europe, isn't it? They have that winter break to let them try and get as many games in prior to the Christmas period.
That's men or women. It would make sense because it's affected both sides, hasn't it? You know, and it hurts us as well because it hurts the club, because particularly with men, Saturday fixtures become midweek fixtures. You don't get so much money in midweek as you do on a weekend. It's sort of, so to have that delay and then, but anyway.
So you talked about the structure going forward with the club. Question for Andy B. Where do you see the club in 5 years' time in terms of the women's team, i.e. the league we could be playing in, the ground we play in?
Good question.
That's a really good question. How long have you got? Yeah, I'd like to think that we're playing in the National Premier League still. Whether the Championship is a stage beyond us, I don't know. If you're talking about 5 years' time, I'll go back to what I said to John at the beginning. I think we're seeing a real transition in what's happening in the women's game. And I think your big Championship and Premier League men's clubs, if you want to call them that at the moment, that are developing, your Leeds, your Newcastles, those sort of teams that are sitting in there now, and others that will start coming through will start to have budgets and spend money on them. They'll start to play more and more games in the same stadiums, and I think it'll become a different beast altogether. Whether we can flick into the Championship for a period before that happens, I don't know. But you might as well be real about it. We are a semi-professional club with in essence a limited budget, and it makes it tough to know how far you can go. I'm over the moon, like everyone else is where we're at now. If you'd have said to me we'd have got out of the league we've got out of and we'd be top of this league at this part of the season, I'd have thought you'd gone mad. I think we talked, initially we said, look, if we're halfway, you know, how good would that be? So doing what we're doing. So sometimes I get surprised. So if we did get promoted, who knows? And if you go for it, certainly if we do go up, then we'll be pushing as hard as we can from behind the scenes as a board to give as much support as we can to Andy and the team to bring in, if we have to bring in other players, although the squad's strong anyway, but if you've got to bring in other players, well then we'll be there trying to make all that happen so that we've got the best opportunity to get as high up the next league as we can. But I think there's a big sea change coming with what's happening.
And I was going to say, as the women's game continues to grow, how is the club looking to bring in new or more fans to watch the Stourbridge women's team, i.e. like fans that watch the men's team?
I don't think. Well, here's a few thoughts. I think social media that you do at the moment gives you a fantastic amount of PR. So it gets out there, and as long as everybody involved is tweeting and retweeting, and they certainly do because we see lots and lots of it, I think we do an awful lot there to promote it and get more people and get more bums on seats. I think maybe if we start to look at the way we sell the club as a whole, so you know that's the men, the boys, the girls, the women, the whole lot, and everybody perceive it as one club, as opposed to maybe some seeing it as, well, I'll come to see the women but I don't need to see the men, or I'll see the men and I'm not seeing the women. We need to try and bring that together. Now, I don't know how we do that, whether it's through having a different type of pricing structure with season tickets and the way we push those. But I think we need to look at that, because we talked about this yesterday, didn't we? And you know, if the women are having 150 to 200 and the men are getting 800, we've got there's a way of sort of making that all fit together better. And I think one of the things to make that happen will be sitting down with people like you and the men's section social media group as well, and trying to come up with those answers between ourselves. But I think you need to be part of that process.
Yeah, and my first question comes in from me to yourself, Bully. Obviously, 5 or 6 years ago when Andy first joined the club, what is it that sort of made him stand out compared to all the rest and it's kept him here?
Great question. Looking forward to it.
I think it probably, other than his miserable face, it was his determination to succeed, his passion for it. And I think we'd had a couple of moments before Andy had come along within the section, less in the adult section but the junior section, where you suddenly realised unless you got somebody in that really, really understands the women's game or the girls' game, it was never going to work. You couldn't just bring any old person in who got experience of managing a team. It wouldn't work. It had failed. We tried. It needs somebody with the experience of dealing with that type of thing, and Andy had that, and to come with that experience, his ambition to keep knocking on the door and pushing and driving forward, and ultimately, you know, he's the manager of the team, and if it keeps being successful, he's going to be here a long while, you know. It'll be him choosing to leave and not us choosing to do anything with him.
Well, there you go. My next question comes to you, Fish. Obviously, on the pitch, obviously we know the quality we have. We're a tier 4 side. Some may argue that we have tier 3 quality at the moment. But off the pitch, sort of away from everything, so the infrastructure and how the club's run, what sort of level do you see us competing at on that side of things?
Tier 3, easy, I would say. Tier 3. I think that step up, as I said, is huge. You've got the teams up there, but I'd go as far, and I'm going to be quite bold here with it, I'd go as far as say that our structures are as good as, if not better, some of the tier 3 teams above us. We know they are, in terms of what's going on in and around the club, what the club do. And I got criticised for talking about expenses in the last pressy, but I think it's important because there's lots I speak to managers week in, week out, even the ones that like me.
Awesome.
Yeah, there is. It's Mike. And he always reverts back to budget, and it's almost like this rumour of we've got some kind of, you know, immaculate budget that's like maybe what Newcastle have got, to the point now I find it quite funny because the numbers that you get get spoken about are ridiculous. So I want to drop that in because it's important that people know I'm not talking about competing with teams up there because we've got a better budget and because the club pay us thousands or millions or whatever people are talking about. They pay expenses, you know, good expenses, but they pay expenses. So do the teams above us in tier 3. So do some of the teams in tier 4. As a matter of fact, so do some of the teams in tier 5. You know, I mean, we knew that some of our players that we took this year were getting expenses last year more than some of the players that we've been paying. So it's important to say that I'm not talking about budget or financial incentives.
I'll tell you why it can't be. It's a really important point. There's a limit to what you can pay under expenses. You know, we're answerable to the HMRC. It's got to be provable. So expenses is expenses. It's not salary. It's not wages. It's not like we do with the men's team, where they're on PAYE and it affects tax codes and there's all that sort of stuff. We can't do it. It has to be justified. That's another level. That's a discussion for another day. Who knows if we get promoted, what sort of discussions go on there. But then again, it's down to budget, sponsors, money coming in for other avenues to be able to fund it. But expenses it is. It can't be, and it's limited to what it can be.
So for me, it's just based around the structures that are in place, and Andy's already touched base. You know, the one thing, the key bit that people should focus on is actually the investment that Andy have put in terms of, you know, people like Carl and Mike, and where you've got full-time members of staff, and that's jobs, isn't it? You know, you're not talking expenses, or you're talking, you know, you're talking about jobs and investment in the infrastructure of the club, not just the women's section, and that's why I feel we're you know, I know that Cal's already in talking to primary schools, and you know he's in a local primary school that I've put him in touch with, and they're running after. So the old infrastructure is as good as any, and if not better, in my opinion. Not just based around money or finances.
Yeah, my final question here, I want to go back to the development team that we were talking about earlier. Sort of their first season in the footballing pyramid of the women's side of the game. What is the sort of aim for them?
Their aim for them as the development team. We're talking about going in the adult league from Sundays next year, you mean?
The reserve team, you mean? Do you mean the reserve team now, or?
Yeah, the one that's been sort of created from the under-18s.
Oh, no,
yeah, so that's the plan. For them is to learn how to play adult football, to compete against adults, get used to the physicality, develop their technical skills, and see whether they can then be good enough to transition into reserves or into first team women players. It has to be. What I've got to say is, it amazed me. I went to watch the reserves on Sunday, and you look at Kira and Grace, and Jeepers, they're going to be good players, aren't they? And they're competing at adult football. Are they both 16? Are they?
Kira's older now.
Is she? Oh no, she's 18. Is she? Yeah, but and Grace 16. And you think, wow, they're going to compete. Grace only little thing, and she's got good balance. So that's what you want to see. Them getting moved around and shuffled around and knocked off the ball like they did, and to get up, pick themselves, go again, and prove that they can do it. It stands them in brilliant stead going forward to being able to develop in the pyramid. And even if they don't go on to play in our first team, they'll go on to become seriously good female footballers, and that's brilliant, isn't it?
I suppose the other thing to add there is that the first aim for them as a team, and for Matt is to win tier 7, and ultimately get into tier 5. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's like we're doing it all again. So we don't have COVID or COVID 24 or something going on in terms of stopping us, but we want that team to progress, like the first team have just done, to get into as closest to the first team as we can. If they can get into tier 5 of the West Mids, that's as close as it will do for the national. So that
is that the limit, tier 5 behind what we've got where we are now?
They wouldn't be able to be in the same, because you'd form the national league then, wouldn't you? Unless the first team went up into the championship. So yeah, as close to the first team as possible, it'd be aimed for that.
A couple of questions for Andy Fisher. Hannah Fishwick had a great game against Hull on the weekend. Also doing well for Birmingham Academy, scoring against Man United last week. What do you consider her role to be for the remainder of the season?
Massive, because she's incredible. And to be fair, so we took her last year, didn't we? And she had probably more of a consistent start to what she did this season. And she's just progressed even more. She's excelled. She's a great character and personality, quirky, funny in every way. All the girls love her. She's just a brilliant person to have around. And then her footballing ability is exceptional, and what she's done this year, she's stepped it up. The difficulty for Annie is that she's had a couple of ankle injuries that have impacted her a little bit. Obviously, we're led, and rightly so, led by Birmingham a little bit in that. So when she has an injury, we kind of have to sing to their hymn sheet. And again, like I say, rightly so. So it's impacted her a little bit. But since she's come back from that injury, honestly, she's flying, and she had a different kind of game on Sunday. I felt, when you needed your physicality is being tested for somebody like Anna, who's a very creative, intelligent footballer, almost a tidy footballer. She was nothing but, she matched that physicality on Sunday and did really well. So she's got a really big part to play in the success this season. I hope it continues.
We spoke a little bit about the plate, but the Birmingham County Cup as well. So with Bertie against Camden Court, Noel against Wolves, Albion against Lye, and yourselves against Sporting Solihull. What do you expect to see in the quarterfinals?
For me, I never want to talk about who I think will go into the semi-finals. Obviously, I want us in there, of course, but we've been part of cup sets, and it'd be disrespectful to talk about other teams and say that I'd expect these teams to go through and these teams to be knocked out. I think a cup is a cup, and anything can happen. I think while you're talking about the County Cup, it's a good point to make that it needs a bit of a refocus, because the gap between some of the teams that come into the County Cup at certain levels, and the teams that come in from the bottom, you've seen some really ridiculous scorelines, and we are getting to a point where we're cutting that softness out. The County Cup's still allowing that to happen. So that needs to be looked at.
Could be seeded, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And there's been talks about that. I think that happens potentially with the men's, one of the men's cups potentially I'd seen on Twitter. So I think that's needed. But I think now you're at this point, your quarterfinals, there's some really exciting teams and ties in there. It's anybody's. I want to be respectful and say it's anybody's. Even Solihull Sporting down here, I've got huge respect for Slav down there. We've got a good relationship, and he has a good outfit that
they've roughed us up.
Yeah, they have. And rightly so, and we saw that. We saw that with Sutton. There's absolutely no disrespect here, but we saw that with Sutton. They came with a game plan and mastered the game plan, took us to penalties. We could have been out of this cup, and you'd have probably come off that pitch, and if we'd have been knocked out of it on penalties, you'd probably have gone fair play Sutton. It wouldn't have been one of those where we said, Stourbridge were hard done by or whatever. Sutton had a game plan and nearly knocked us out the County Cup, and it would have been fair. A bit like we did Wolves in a few years ago when we took them to penalties and nearly pinched that. So it happens, it's cup football, and it's great. So for me, as long as we're in there, I don't care, and I'd love to pull an Albion in the semi-final at War Memorial. It's my dream time.
Okay, so let's go pass on to Josh and Kieran with some questions from social media.
The first question comes in from Stu Barker to yourself, Bully. Obviously, you mentioned there that you were down to watch the reserve side against Doncaster. What did you make of that match first and foremost, and what have you made of the sort of transitional period that they've been going through?
I thought it was really good. Because we've had a few. I don't think anyone's beat us easy, have they? But they've had some losses, and it's always difficult to keep your chin up. They were on the back of a difficult decision, weren't they, down at Portsmouth, where they got done by the goalkeeper kicking the ball outside the box, and you could have a free kick for that every day of the week. So God knows which linesman's been brave enough to give that.
It wasn't, by the way. Footage shows it wasn't.
It wasn't.
Box,
yeah. So that's a bit naughty in my view. But we lost. G's come in. She's like a bundle of energy, isn't she? So what she will bring to that team is lots of spark, lots of enthusiasm, and you could see that on Saturday. You know, to a person, they grafted so hard and worked so hard. I know Doncaster are down the sort of lower level with ours, aren't they? But we beat them no trouble. And if it hadn't have been for a linesman there cheating, it would have been 5 or 6, not just 3 or 4. So I thought they did brilliantly. And to see that mixture, like I said earlier, of really young players, bit of experience in there, little bit of quality, it was great to see. And I think she'll be brilliant for them. We'll keep our eye on her. She'll get a lot of support from everyone. She's got a couple of good assistants with her, hasn't she, with Sav and the other chap, Sean McNally. And I think she'll be great. What was funny for me was we'd had one goal disallowed for offside. We then had another one where we were clear disallowed. Well, we didn't score, but it was offside. We would have scored. And she shouted from the sideline, "I am now bored, everybody, I'm bored." And then all of a sudden we started playing well and scored some goals. So I don't know what coaching manual she read that in, but it worked a treat. So I think we'll see that start to progress. And of course what we're doing, we've talked about earlier, with doing the adult football sooner with the devs, the quality of the players coming through to the reserves will be better and stronger, and all of a sudden we'll compete better in that reserve league. I genuinely think there's opportunity in that for that reserve league, for players playing for other teams at different tiers, and I'm talking good players playing where they'd rather go and play first team football instead of playing in the reserve team, and have opportunity occasionally to play in the first team, because some of the level and quality that's there I think is better than what they're getting elsewhere, but it'll be what it's going to be.
And this sort of ties into a question from Kenny Hadley. As you're always around the club, Andy, you're really, really approachable, and you're always available for a chat to support people in the club. Do you feel that's important in your role, so people can see your passion and that side of you as a person in general? Yeah,
Andy Pountney and I have always been the same, really. Whether it's the men, the women, wherever we are, if we're in the club, we don't want to be in a boardroom. We want to be in the bar or the clubhouse with people, and if somebody wants to ask you a question or get involved with you, you know, we're a semi-pro club. It's not like we sort of need to, well, even professional clubs shouldn't be aloof, should they? You should be approachable and be answerable to the stuff that's going on, whether that be good or bad, and we've always done that, and you know, we like a pint and a chat. It's nice, isn't it, to sort of enjoy it. Part of the reason we do it's not to sit in a boardroom making decisions, thinking about financing and doing budgets. The fun bits when we're going to games, and we're sort of, you know, where did we went to Donny Bell's, didn't we? And I'm on the couch, I'm having a pint on the way there, I'm sitting with the supporters. We've got the mega blaster going as we're walking into the dressing rooms, and that's just the best thing. I'm sort of shaking my head thinking, how brilliant is this? They've got no chance, you know. You feel like you're already one step ahead before you get there, you know what I mean? That's a great feeling, so I think it's brilliant. I love it.
Best part of the interview so far is Mega Blaster. Definitely should be the interview tag.
I don't know what to call it.
The Mega Blaster.
Somebody's got it on their shoulder. I don't know who it was. You.
The next question here comes in from Rob Winnell, for yourself, Andy Fisher. Yeah. It's apparent that we have such a fantastic team, and that's been shown by the success we've had on the pitch. But he says he appreciates that every decision isn't sort of very easy, and he says, what is the most difficult decision that you've sort of had to make this season?
Management is tough. You know, I'm massively appreciative of Mike, the assistant manager, because, you know, as we know, he does a lot of the coaching and focusing on that. It allows me to make these hard decisions and focus purely on management, and especially in the week having really difficult conversations. And those difficult conversations seem to have been a lot easier over the last 12 months, I would say, in the levels that we're at. But I think looking back on the whole time, there's been some really difficult decisions, especially early on. But I think probably that transition of last season, really coming up into Tier 4, knowing that you've got a group of girls, you know, a really good set group of girls who'd been with us through, you know, a couple of seasons of promotions, but not forget that it was delayed because of COVID. So that added another year onto it. So these group of girls had been there through thick and thin, stuck with us when they didn't really need to. But you get to a point, and it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again, unfortunately. You get to a point where actually that journey ends for some of those players, because as a club we're ambitious and we want to continue to drive forward and make sure we're the best, one of the best in the league. So you have to have those difficult decisions with players who, unfortunately, you know, one, you know, can't carry through, or, you know, for many reasons, or can't commit to that. And having some of those conversations at the end of last year, you know, with people you know, on you, and you know, you're close with, and they're committed for you over the last 2 or 3 seasons, to say, you know, we're not necessarily going to take you on the journey to the next level, was hard, was tough. But credit to those players, you know, there's a few in mind that some of them have gone and played the reserve league and are smashing up there, and have just took it on the chin and understand where we're at. And some have moved on because they can't commit to the commitment we wanted. And that'll happen again this year, especially if we're successful and get promoted. There'll be different conversations. You know, we're already discussing, you know, what a training week looks like, if that is a two a week session, or is it a 3 a week session, which is in our minds already. So things change like that, don't they? So you're having those difficult conversations with me, and I think that's probably the most difficult moment of it all. And it's good for it just to be that, because luckily as a manager, it's easier when you're winning and you're successful and sitting top of the table and in a good position as a cup. It's when you're losing and you're not doing too well. Difficult decisions are made harder, aren't they? So
there's an art, isn't there, to that camaraderie, retaining that camaraderie when you're having to break a team up that's done so well. You know, people will look from the outside, think that's easy, and it's not. He might make it look easy, and his team make it look easy, but it's not. And that camaraderie has been so important, hasn't it? You know, ignore the expenses, money, whatever you want to call it. Camaraderie has brought us a lot of the success we've had, for sure.
And following on from that, we've had a question from Rich Clark. We're now heading to the second half of the season and in pole position in the league. We're there to be shot at. We were the chasers last season. How do you think that challenge is being the opposite to last season, where we're the top instead of chasing, and what challenge does that bring?
were we chasing a lot last season? I suppose we were, yeah. I think Andy's right. The challenge is keeping that group of players humble. And I think when you did some work, one of you did some work with Levick, an interview with Levick, and she said, you know what, it's when Andy puts stuff around the change rooms, and I'll put words like humble, stay focused, don't be disrespectful to your opposition. And we can't do that this year at all, at any point, and we shouldn't do that, because the T is tough and everyone could beat everybody. You know, Lincoln have absolutely shot up the league over the last few months. They were sitting second or third, and they lose to Leek on Sunday, you know, and Leek could lower down, but Leek are tough and give us a tough game down here. And so it's Andy's hit the nail on the head and answered it for me, and this is what I tell the girls. You can do it for my team talk for me, actually. That's what I tell the girls week in, week out, is every week's a different challenge. Every week is you focus on that team in front of you, and you face that challenge, and whatever happens, you know, you win, you focus on the next one, you lose, you regroup, you focus on the next one, and that's all this group can do at this moment in time, because every game's a different one, and we've seen that. Sutton straight after Christmas, different challenge. Hull, different challenge. Moors, completely different challenge. Carlton, you know, so we've just got to keep grounded and focused, and almost put the league to the side now, because she's sat in a position where you can do that. You can say, we know where we are, we know where we're at, let's just focus on what we've got to get out of this next game. And that's what we do with the group, really.
James, any more?
Yeah, we can do. We can go for Anthony Wilson's coming with one. We've got midweek games coming into play now with the fixture list. How are we going to utilise the squad for them games?
Because we've got a massively quality, good squad, really. You know, this is why we're supported. It was important that we got that bit of momentum right before Christmas, and we were in top position. We could have just sat down and said, you know, actually we'll leave it at that. And I think what's proven is that you need to continue to add to that quality, and that's what we've done. We brought Lexi and Lois in right before the end of the year, and it's been a bit of a dream really for us, because you lose Mill, or you know we've lost Lois we know. You have a couple of injuries, you got those players to bring in. So we've got a good squad. Every single player is good in that team. Is a great quality, so we can rotate as we need to, and that's exactly what we'll do without concern of impacting the squad enough to damage us really.
And the final one from Rich Drury for yourself, Bully. Do you have a vote?
Richard. Yeah, not one with his number in now.
Okay, so just in closing then, the month of February we're playing Solihull Moor, Sheffield, and another cup game that could take us to a final. Is it fair comment to say that this could be one of the biggest months in Stourbridge FC women's history so far?
You can answer that first.
Can I?
Yeah.
I looked at Clive sent the fixture list through, so I had a little look at it, and Cal sent it I think as well today with all the games that are coming up. It certainly looks like a huge month, and I certainly think that by the time we get to the end of February we'll have a great understanding of how close we are to where we'd all like to be. And of course while we're doing that, all the other teams are playing, so we'll see who the competitors are going to be, and how they're performing, and what's left to achieve to be able to get where we want to be. It is a big month. There's a lot of games, and hopefully the weather won't get hold of it, and we can come out of it in a good place.
Yeah, and the final one here comes in from our good friend Radio Kev. He says that with the recent weekend league results, there seems to be sort of a clear split between the top 6 teams in our league and the rest of the division. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll go back to what I said. I think I don't know whether there is. It might look like that on you know when you look at the table, but I can tell you now from my perspective, and it's probably the same last year. I never look at it like that. I never say go in a week and go, that team's going to be easier than that. Really, I think that would be stupid of us, if I'm honest, to be blunt. I think we have to take. You've seen that, as I said, with the Lincoln and league result. You have to take every team in this division seriously, and the same preparation as we will do for who's second at the moment. It's Moors, isn't it? Yeah. The same preparation that we do for Moors, we'll do for whoever's down at the bottom end of the table, because I think you'd be naive to do anything different. So I don't want to talk about, you know, I get why Kev's saying it, but I don't want to talk about differences in terms of the league table. Yes, we've got our eye open in terms of who are our close competitors. You know, we know Donny Bells are on our heels for sure. You know, and you'd be stupid again not to focus on that. But every game, as I said, it has to be the same focus, the same challenge. So, and I think when the league is open, you have a bad end to the season. I said it in the last one, didn't I? You know, in terms of we can say we've had a really good season to this point. If we slip up now, you could almost say it hasn't been a great season if you were top at Christmas and you end up 3rd or 4th, maybe even 5th. So I think it's respecting every team, regardless where they are in the league, and focus on each challenge as it comes week in, week out, and that's what we'll do.
We've played Sheffield twice, we've not looked like beating them once.
No.
And they're second bottom, aren't they, at the moment? Oh, I can't believe they're second bottom. So I'm with Andy on that. I think everyone's a challenge in that league if you drop your standards.
There's points to be lost everywhere across the board, and I think that's why we're excited about it. It's what we wanted, didn't we?
Yeah.
But, you know, it's not a 2-horse race, and we don't think that. It's in everybody's, you know, and I think we'd be absolutely naive to sit here and say we're gonna get maximum points for the rest of the season. I think we'd be silly to think that. So it's everybody's opportunity really, but it's lucky we've got some points on the board and sat well at the moment. Each game as it comes.
Okay, so that concludes the press conference. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. Best of luck for February, and see you in a few weeks' time.
Thanks.
Cheers, thank you.